Good afternoon. My name is Rebecca Bruner, and I am interviewing the Torquemadas today, and that would be Bruce and Erika. And it is September 16th today, 2024, and we are at the museum on Main. I asked the Torquemadas to come in because they relatively recently bought the Cottinger barn. Was this 2 years ago?
2021.
2021. So we're going to be talking about that, but also about how they got to Pleasanton, because Erika grew up in Japan. So why don't we start with that, Erika? Okay. So you grew up, what age did you come to America?
Well, I've been back and forth. So okay. I was raised here. I came here once when I was 10. Lived here for about a year, just so I can learn English, and then we moved back to Japan.
So your whole family moved here?
It was actually, at the time, it was my mom and my brother and I. We came here for that 1 year, just so my brother and I can go to the school here, learn English a little better. We were going to American school in Japan, but we thought it'll be better, just to really.
Why don't you tell what your dad did, though?
My father was a news anchor in Japan on a TV station. Okay. So it was an American TV program, TV station. And so he did that. And that's
now, was he Japanese or?
He is a Japanese American. So
okay.
He was the third generation Japanese American. So I am technically fourth generation, even though I was born in Japan. And so we moved back here when I was 16. And so I've been back here since I was 16 years old. But yeah, that's kind of.
At 10, where did you go to live?
At 10, we lived with my grandmother in San Jose. My grandmother lived here, so she had a home there. So we stayed with her for that 1 year. Okay. It was the best childhood memory that I had. Because in 1976, bicentennial year, so a lot of things were happening, right? And as a child, it's just so much fun. All the activities at school and fairs and things like that. So really, really enjoyed it.
Did you want to go back home?
I would, as a child, you make a lot of friends and, you're with your own, family. So I wasn't missing Japan at the time. And we knew that we were going back after 1 year that we, because my father was still in Japan. He was working over there, he couldn't come with us. And so for us, it was just having fun every day. So we loved it. Yeah.
Now, Grandma was in San Jose. Was Grandma Japanese?
My grandmother was a second generation Japanese American. So yes, she was Japanese, but she was a second generation Japanese. And so she's gone through the internment camp. My father and my mother, my grandmother both went to internment camp in Colorado.
Okay.
Namachi camp.
So Grandma that we're talking about from San Jose is Dad's mom.
Yes.
And they were where when they were picked up for the internment?
They were in Los Angeles area. That's where they lived. And then from there, they traveled to Colorado and they were stationed in that.
Did they tell you much about that time?
My grandmother would tell us some stories, some bad experience in her mind, right? Because obviously during that time, it was really hard for them. She had just bought a home in Los Angeles and she made everything nice, new furniture, dishes and everything. And then she received that notice that she would have to go. So
how did they receive the notice?
I think through a letter.
Okay.
Through a letter they received. And so my grandmother had 2 days or 1 week, it's just a short amount of days to pack up everything, get rid of everything that they had at their house so they can move. And so she had some people that would come into her house and take advantage of Japanese Americans having to leave, no choice. They have to get rid of things. And so she said she had these brand new set of china that somebody just offered insulted amount that they put on it. So she said, I just grabbed it one at a time and just threw it on the ground, just said, here, take it. If you're gonna, if I have to pay that kind of money, then I don't want it. So she would throw it, stories like that, she was.
But it meant a lot to her, those dishes she had
Absolutely.
saved for
Yes.
all that and now had to And people did take advantage of that situation did she live alone with your dad at the time?
She lived, she was a single mother at the time, so she lived with my aunt, my father's older sister, and then my father and herself. So it was three of them that just bought the house. So I can imagine, what was going through her mind at the time.
Now, how did she manage to survive as a single parent? Was she working?
She was working, I think at the time, she was working as like a seamstress. She's done a lot of seamstress work. Also at a restaurant, she was probably working as a waitress. So she would probably have to hold several jobs, to try to make ends meet.
May I ask what happened to her husband?
Her husband, this will be my father's father. Yes.
Correct.
So they were divorced, I think, by the time my father was really young. And so she was really a single, mom for many years. So during the whole time in the internment camp, she would have to survive, right? As a single mom. And she said that was really, really rough. So as soon as the war ended, she said, okay, I have to marry somebody because right after the war, this would be really difficult for a single, woman to be living. So she married then her second husband and started a family, another family.
An American?
No, Japanese.
Japanese.
Japanese, yes.
Okay. Boy, that would have been rough. How old was your dad?
My dad was 10 when he entered the internment camp until he was 14. And that's when they were in there for 4 years. So if you ask my dad back then, he said, I have nothing but good memories, which is so interesting, right? My grandmother, everything was bad. But my father, it was like everything was great. They had Boy Scouts there. They had little baseball teams there. It was a community, and so he thought this was great.
This is kind of fun.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. So, yeah.
But I think sometimes children do that. I know I had a neighbor who lived in Holland during World War II, and he said the kids would love to go and watch the airplanes, and they knew how many people should exit an airplane if they were shot. And so then, they thought it was kind of fun watching this stuff. And he even had a German officer living in the house, and it really bothered his mother, but to him it was kind of exciting. It was.
It's not something, the child's mind, so
in the child's mind, they make, they just
so.
do it differently. But Mom had a lot of concerns about what was life going to be like after the war. She lost her home, or did she?
She lost her home. I believe she lost her home. So she ultimately didn't go. Did she go back to? Yes, they did go back to Los Angeles, lived there for a while, but then ended up moved out to San Jose area. So then they started. Back then, a lot of the people started a farm, right? So my grandparents had a strawberry farm.
Okay.
And so that's what they started out. This was in 1940.
And many of them around here were doing fruit farms and
Yes.
stuff. I understand that were interned as well. Yeah.
Yes, they did. Yeah. So after my father, because he had to help also, right, in the strawberry farm, and he said, I can't eat strawberries anymore. So all my life growing up,
No strawberries.
he would never eat the strawberries anymore. That was it for him.
I can understand that. So how does your family, if you don't mind me asking, how do they look at that time now? Are they resentful? Are they angry? Did they feel it was just had to be done at the time?
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of wish it, didn't happen. Obviously, my grandparents, they passed, and so have my father. So, I haven't talked to them about it in a while.
Right.
But childhood, during when I was small, and we would talk about their experiences, especially my grandmother. She would talk about, her experiences at the camp, and it was always, I had to be strong. I have to be strong as a woman to try to survive, raising two children. But I've never really heard my father say, oh, that was a horrible experience, because his experience wasn't as bad.
Yeah.
But it doesn't change the fact that it's still a lot of people suffered, through that time. And they received some funding from the government back in the 80s. So I think, I don't remember what the price was, but 10,000 or something like that each person received it. But they really felt like, well, that's just money. The experience doesn't change, and we still went through a lot of the hardship.
Yeah.
So, it's not a lot of family members on my father's side that can speak about that anymore, right? Because it's been so long, and a lot of my families had already passed on. So, really, that my grandfather and my father was the last person that I knew, somebody that went through that.
But how nice that they talked to you about it.
Yes.
That they, so often people don't talk about, especially bad experiences.
I wished I can videotape. We were going to do that with my grandmother. In fact, we had just bought a video camera, and we were going to do what, you're doing to us. And oh gosh, and then she got sick right after that. So unfortunately, we weren't able to. But I think it really is, if you can capture that history and tell it, and have it as a memory, to pass it down. I think that's really a nice thing to do.
Now, how do you feel it affected you in your life?
Personally, not a lot. It didn't affect me directly, only through the stories that I heard from my father or my grandmother, and you feel really bad about what they have to go through. And so I would share that story to my children, so they can hear, what their grandmother or great grandmother had gone through, or grandfather had gone through. So they hear bits and pieces. I don't know a full story either. I'm sure there's a lot more, but the little that I know, I would try to pass it down to my children so they understand, the hardship. And because of them, we're here, that we can have this. So I think that's important to tell that story.
Well, now, how did your dad get back to Japan and on a TV station?
That's an interesting story. He always, I think, my father didn't really speak the language growing up, because he grew up here.
Okay.
Japanese. He grew up Japanese. He was Japanese American, but went to American school, so he didn't really speak the language. And so when he was an adult, he said, I really like to study about Japanese samurai, Japanese sword, some history about that. So he decided to travel to Japan with another friend of his that also had interest in Japan. And he did that. And when he did that, he met my mother. And so he said, okay, I think I want to stay here. And he landed a job as in the TV station, luckily. And so he worked there for 20-some years until we moved back here.
Okay.
So, yeah.
It's interesting, that how he went back to Japan.
He did, he did.
NHK TV, right?
NHK. It's a big broadcasting company.
And it's all in English. There.
Yes, it's all in English.
Okay.
So he was part of the international, so they have like the Japanese side and the international side. And so he worked on the international side back then. And yeah, he really enjoyed, he was a writer, and he would produce programs and, be in front of the camera. So he really enjoyed the time that he had there.
Interesting. Then what brought him back to the States?
It's because we were, my brother and I have a younger brother, and when we were born, back then they didn't have a dual citizenship. So we were born as an American, even though we were born in Japan. We had to take after our father's citizenship.
Oh.
And so...
Japan said that you have to take your
Yes,
father's
Japan's
citizenship.
yes,
Okay,
correct. So even though you were born in that country, you couldn't take that.
okay.
And nowadays it's not the same, it's
Okay.
different. So we did that. And so we lived there until I was about 15 or 16. And then we found out that, if you don't come back to America by the time you're 18, you will lose your US citizen. So you would become a Japanese citizen. So then we had to make that decision. And so my father said, yeah, eventually we're probably going to be back in the United States anyway. So let's make that move. And that was the reason that we all moved.
So your parents made that choice for you?
Yes.
Or did they, okay.
Yes, we all moved as a family.
But I mean, they kind of said, did they ask you what you wanted to do, or did
No, we didn't. We didn't have a choice. We go, you go.
they? Yeah, but they wanted you to get
Yes,
that.
yes.
Why? Why was it so important to them?
I think it's because it's just we thought they probably figured that going to school in America it would be better for my brother and I. The Japanese school system is different than the school systems over here. And so, I'm sure just thinking that they figured that it would be better for all of us, but especially for my brother and I. Because my father would say, used to say, if it wasn't of you guys, I would have stayed in Japan because, he liked it there, working. So I think
So he would have
he would
opted
have,
to stay.
I think so.
And now looking back at it, are you glad that you came here, or do you wish you would have stayed?
No, I am really glad. I love America, and I am very glad. My brother as well. My brother, when he turned 18, he joined the U.S. military. So he started as a Marine, and then he just this year retired as a U.S. Navy. And
Master Chief.
Yeah, he was a senior master chief. And so,
So we have a young man, your brother, I guess he's older than that, but we have a man whose father was in an internment camp, who grew up in Japan mainly, comes back here and then joins the U.S. military and does it for his whole career.
And my father,
Interesting.
Yes, it is interesting. My father was also in the military. That's also interesting too. Even though, he went through all that, he joined the military. He was also a Marine. So he joined the military when he was 18, and he was a Marine for 4 years. So I think my brother, watching my father go through that, he thought, maybe I can do that too. It can't be that bad. But he told us, how tough. Marine is really tough, right? The training and everything. So he stayed as a Marine for 4 years, my brother as well.
But the interesting part of, just Japan and the United States weren't friends at one time at all. And then, the family was put in internment camps, and yet, they come to America, love it, and go into the military and serve the country, which is an amazing story in itself that they would do that,
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
And so what have you been doing with your life since you came from Japan?
Well, I went to school,
Okay.
finished school, and then we worked various places, but ultimately I ended up in a company that Bruce, my husband, started in San Jose.
Okay.
And so I worked there as a human resources person, and hired people and trained people and
Married the boss.
married the boss.
Which is against all the rules.
Which against all the rules, nobody knew
Wouldn't
about
happen
it.
today, probably.
Right. So, and then raised 3 children.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have 3 children. Oldest is a daughter and 2 sons, and we moved here in
Well, we bought the property in 1995, and then we built the house and finished it in 2001.
Okay.
So right at the time, I remember right as we moved into the house in September, watching TV and was watching the second plane going to the Twin Towers. And it was, I just sold a company and had gone in my first retirement. I call it my first now. And watched the stock market plummet for the next 3 or 4 months.
Yes.
And so ended up going back to work because everything I had was in the market.
Yeah. So, when year did you meet?
We look at each other.
What year do we meet? 1989?
Yeah, probably
Something
89,
like that,
88.
yeah.
And you were both living where?
I was living in San Jose. I think you
Yeah,
lived
I
in
was living in
Fremont already.
Fremont.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So Bruce, I think you told me that you were born in Castro Valley?
I was born in Castro Valley.
Okay.
My mom came from Mexico,
Oh,
and my grandfather owned a grocery store in downtown Niles.
oh,
So across from the gas station there, where the gas station is, you enter in, my grandfather actually rented the Victorian house there, and then the property next to that was a storefront, and he ran a Mexican market. And then Giovanni Lanfrey owned that property, the Victorian house, and the property my grandfather rented for the store.
okay.
And he thought he was gonna be put into an internment camp. And so what he did, he went to my grandfather,
Now Giovanni, he's
Lanfrey.
Italian,
correct,
but they did inter some of the Italians as well.
Correct.
And we don't talk about that as much, but yes.
and he thought for sure he was gonna be sent
Okay,
to a camp. So he came to my grandfather and said, do you wanna buy this? Cause I'm gonna lose it. So if you wanna buy it, my grandfather didn't want to. And it went all the way up to the final days. And if I said, look, if you don't buy it, I'm gonna lose it and there's no guarantee you're gonna be here. So my grandfather ended up buying the property and from him at that time. So, and then,
did he go to an internment camp?
I don't know.
Okay,
I don't know. I don't know what the end result was, but I know he sold the property to my grandfather.
yeah,
And so then my mom was pretty much grew up in that house, getting across the street from the gas station. And yeah, now actually we own that now because my mom passed it on to my sister and I. So I've been working on it ever since, but
older homes.
it's a
require
labor of
that.
love, yes, a lot of work, a lot of things to be done, so.
But Bruce, your name, isn't it your last name more of a Spanish last
It's
name?
Castilian Spanish, so my dad's father
Yes,
came from Spain,
oh, okay,
and there were 2 siblings who were born in Spain, and then 3 that were born in Hawaii, and then 2 that were born here. Yeah, that's 7. So, because at that time, my grandfather had to go to Maui first, and he had to stay in Maui for 4 years in order to qualify to come to the
Mainland.
States here, to the mainland.
so your grandfather came from Spain and he wanted to migrate to America,
America, correct,
but he had to go to Maui first?
correct, and work in the sugarcane fields. In fact, Erika's
My family did the same thing.
did the same thing. They had to go to Maui first, and
My
because we visited,
great-grandparents.
we visited and we figured out that her great-grandparents and my grandparents were actually in the same
They might have met each other.
different
Yes.
camps. Yeah, there was
Which
a
is
Spanish camp,
amazing.
and there was a Japanese camp, and I think Portuguese also.
Portuguese,
Yeah.
Koreans,
What
Chinese.
what years are we talking about?
That must have been
1900s, early
the
1900s.
1920, something like that.
yeah.
In that
Why?
earlier, actually earlier, much earlier.
Earlier
than
than
that.
that, yeah.
Early 1900s.
Yeah.
So that was a United States law that if you wanted to only for certain people from certain countries or
I
everybody?
don't know for certain countries, but it was a 4-year period.
Okay, and then if you did that time working the sugarcane fields, you could then come to the mainland?
Correct,
Oh,
correct. So you had to spend time there. My grandfather then, when he came here, he moved to Union City.
okay,
And in Union City, he worked for, that we always called him Mr. Rhodey, who owned the Niles Nursery.
oh, okay,
And the interesting thing is, which I'm sure we'll get to, but there's an adobe home in the Niles Nursery
yes,
that my grandfather rebuilt for them because it was in disrepair. So
and he knew how to work with adobe.
he used to build adobe homes in Spain, yeah. So,
Interesting,
Yeah.
yeah. So they were guaranteed if you worked for 4 years, you could come to the States.
I don't know what the guarantee is, but there was
At the time.
the limit, yeah, you had to work for 4 years and then they'd
And they didn't want to stay.
give you the ability to come to the mainland. Because I guess you couldn't come directly at that time,
Yeah.
you know.
My
here.
family stayed. Your family decided to
Yeah,
move.
because your great-grandmother?
My grandparents stayed in Oahu, actually, and that's where they raised their family.
Yeah.
But only my grandmother moved to the mainland later.
Because you were saying your grandmother told you a story about her great-grandmother during Pearl Harbor, saw the planes
Oh,
going over.
Yes.
that would be something. Yeah, those times in history that we remember where we were when it
Yeah.
happened, yeah. But your family then stayed in Hawaii,
Yes.
and your family then came to,
Came to the mainland, yeah.
yeah. Why Union City? Did he know people?
I think there was a stronger Hispanic community there, to be honest. You know, because again, my mom was in Niles at that time, and my dad was in Union City. So,
So mom is,
Mexican,
okay, and dad is
Spanish,
Spanish.
yeah.
Okay, and you identify as,
Spanish, Mexican,
Both.
both. Yeah, it
Okay.
doesn't matter, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
Hispanic, how about that one?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Even though I don't speak a word, because at the time, I remember when I was in school, it was not, my mom didn't want us to speak Spanish. So my parents were fluent, but they only spoke it in front of us when they didn't want us to understand.
And that was true of a lot of
Yeah,
people, that they would only speak when they didn't want the kids to know what they were talking about.
yeah, so,
And the kids didn't learn the languages, especially I think World War II, that, because the Italians were in disgrace, the Germans,
yeah, Japanese. everything,
Japanese, yeah, I mean, it was really
That's why I'm jealous, Erica's fluent in both, and I can't speak a word, so,
Yeah, and it really is too bad when we lose that, because
yeah.
your grandfather, did he speak English as well?
My dad's father spoke English, not as much as my mother's father.
Okay,
So, but they both could speak. My grandfather on my dad's side could speak some English, and being that my mom's father ran a grocery store, I guess he was pretty,
probably
Fluent in
pretty
both,
fluent,
yeah.
Okay, so what kind of business did you start?
Well, out of college, I went to work for Xerox Corporation.
Okay,
Out of college, yeah, in 1979. And then I worked with Xerox till 1983. And then had an idea for a business that I proposed to them because I was doing very well for Xerox at the time. And they actually turned it down. And so what I ended up doing, I had a manager at the time, Mike Michaelis, that I was working for at Xerox in Silicon Valley. And over a plan and review session one day at lunch that went on for 5 or 6 hours, I remember looking at him and saying, "Are you saying to go into business?" And he said, "Yeah." And we started, it was called Reprographic Systems, Inc. And when we did, outsourcing was just coming into popularity, it was just starting. It was in the infancy stage. Whereas you'd contract out to somebody
Yeah,
to do something that you didn't specialize in.
okay,
So what we did is we did the manuals for companies like Apple Computer, Hewlett Packard, NEC Electronics. So we were at the very starts because in those days, right, they'd have revisions on software. So they'd have to get it out to all their engineers so the software could be changed. Well, we do the documentation for them. What ended up happening, we came up with an idea to put that system inside of companies. Steve Jobs, who I met a few times in the process of negotiating contracts with him, was anal about security. He wanted nothing leaving Apple. This is when they were on Banley Road, probably about 300 employees. And so what we did, we put people, equipment, supplies, everything we know, we put it inside of Apple and operated as if we were Apple, but we were RSI. And they'd come to us, people would bring us things, say, I need, 20 sets of these manuals for the engineers, and we need it done by this time, and blah, blah, blah. We'd put tabs, and we'd put, all the documentation together, and then we'd get it out to the engineers. So, and then that turned into running the mail room and, doing the software, doing the floppy disk, copying the floppy disk and the diskettes that went in the packages to go to people. So,
Okay.
yeah, and it kind of exploded. We went from started the company with about 3 people, and we sold with about 200 people. So,
wow,
yeah, and that was over about 14 years.
and that's how you met Erika.
That's how I met Erika. Erika came in and working in HR, and
Yeah,
we got to know each other, and we had a little workout room in our company, and I'd go in early in the morning, and every now and then this person would come in and work out also, and that's how we got to meet.
nice, yeah. What a great story. And that you worked with Steve Jobs, and yeah, I imagine he was pretty, you had to be very careful about letting your secrets
He
get
was, interesting because those days, I remember going to the park in Cupertino and I'd take a bag lunch, right, early on. This was actually before I started RSI,
Okay,
because I had met him on one occasion. Really, my getting to know him better was after as RSI,
yeah,
but he would walk all the time. I'd see him several times walking in Cupertino Park, and he'd be talking to himself,
oh,
and a lot of hand gestures, kind of walking around.
Maybe he had an iPod in his ear.
Yeah,
people
right.
didn't have.
No, he did. So, yeah, interesting times because
Yeah.
I remember having the opportunity to buy Apple stock at $2 a share. Unfortunately, I didn't do that. So
hindsight's
hindsight's 2020.
Oh, gosh, we
Yeah.
had that.
Anybody have a time machine?
Yeah. So, then you retired for a while, and then you went
Yeah.
back to work
Yeah.
with,
So I sold the company. I worked for the acquiring company for about 3 years. And then it wasn't, it's tough when you run a company for so long and you are used to doing things in a certain way, and we'll just say we disagreed on how things should go.
sure,
And Mike and I both left the company. He retired, I retired, and he actually moved to Hawaii after that. I stayed here in the Bay Area because I had,
Yeah,
a
children.
young family and children, even though I thought about going to Hawaii. And yeah, it ended up being a little bit of a nightmare because no one expected what was going to happen next. And being that I was pretty much in high tech, had everything in the market,
yeah,
and kind of took a tumble. And that's how I ended up at that point becoming a mortgage banker
okay,
and getting into real estate. And because my mom always said if she had 2 nickels to rub together, she'd buy real estate.
okay.
So she always told me.
And did you do that?
Oh, yeah, she
Yeah,
did
she
do that,
did.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
She owned, she owned,
7 homes.
seven, well, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. She owned 9 homes at the time, and she didn't have a, 4th grade education, neither did my dad, you know, because they had to work. So, but if she had something to rub together, it was important to her. My mom kind of wore the pants in the family, and so it was important to her, and she talked to my dad and always buying property.
Okay,
So what my sister and I have done, we've kept those properties.
okay. Well, and it was easier at one point to buy property. They weren't as expensive,
Yeah.
but also, you had some of those that you could assume the loans.
Well, they were all, actually, when my mom passed, my dad passed, all the properties were paid off. The difference was in those days, you know, Prop 19 now, if you change title, you up in basis, you know, for taxes.
Right.
To give you an idea, we've got a property in Niles that I moved into when I came home from the hospital to this house. So it was built in
Oh.
1955. It
Okay,
was a house I came home to, my parents had just moved into it. And they paid $18,000 for it. And today it's worth close to $2 million. So, and then my mom tells a story of she bought a vacant lot on 3rd Street in Niles. And at a young age, I think she worked for Southern Pacific at that time. And she was going through the Sears Roebuck catalog. And she picked a house out of the Sears Roebuck catalog and had 2 of them built on that property. And so my sister and I have that duplex today to where, yeah, and it's just, you know, I think she paid $2,500 for the lot, and she paid, each house was $5,000 at the time.
it's just amazing for us now to think about, you can pick a house out of a catalog.
Out of the catalog.
Yeah.
And they're both identical, one
Yeah.
built in front of the other.
Still there. to this
Still
day.
there, still standing strong, yeah.
Well, your mother did a great job.
Yeah,
She
she really did. She was a tough lady, you know.
And she was Mexican,
Yes.
Yes.
you said, yeah.
Yeah. And so my dad actually lived at Normandy Beach.
Oh.
So him and his, he was the only one that got deployed overseas. He had 2 brothers.
Yeah.
And my Uncle Johnny was in the Korean War. And my Uncle Tony was in World War II. My dad was in World War II. My dad was the one that went over at Normandy and then went through France. But he talked about it really the most one time after when my brother and I took him to see Saving Private Ryan.
Oh.
And we asked him, I said, was it like that? And he just said worse. He says, you can't. You know, and that was, he never talked about it, never showed us anything from it. And when we went to my parents' house to kind of start to clean things out, because my parents saved everything, and found a lot of interesting things. We found a bayonet from a German SS soldier. We found a Luger. We found the script that they used to use overseas for money. We found some medals that he had won. He was a 50 caliber machine gunner. So evidently they used tracers because he was, as he went through, he'd be on gas convoys. And so they'd have tracers that shoot out, and they wore these special glasses so they could see the tracers easier to see if it hit their target or where it was going. So there's a lot of different things, but another one where I wish we could have talked to him more, but it's just something he didn't talk about. That was that age of you just did the job that you had to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
But he was not hurt when he was over
No, he
there?
wasn't.
I'm sorry.
He wasn't hurt.
He was never
He
injured?
was,
Yeah.
came back,
That's-
yeah,
That's
healthy.
very lucky,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, he had a lot of friends in Union City, because he was living in Union City when they've got a monument there with all the soldiers that went away to war. And he's on that monument. You see a lot of his friends, because I took him there, that had died in the war, so
But you never went in the military?
I never went in the military. Didn't want us to go in the military.
Oh, he didn't want you to?
No,
Oh,
no. Want us to go to school,
okay,
so.
that was his, okay.
Didn't want us to move away either, because at one time with Xerox, they wanted to transfer me to New York.
Yeah,
I was doing well for the company, and Xerox was kind of like IBM. They said in those days IBM stood for I've been moved.
Oh,
yeah.
And Xerox was the same way. So in 1980, I did extremely well for the company, and I created something that no one else had done, and it was extremely successful. So sent me out to New York for interviews. They wanted to move me to Leesburg, Virginia, but stationed in New York, and I traveled back and forth, and my parents pretty much said, no, you're not moving. So at that time, we still listened to our parents. They said, no, you can't leave the family. Because all of my family is really here in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
My cousins.
And it meant that
My
much
sister,
to your
yeah.
family that, yeah. you're not
To
gonna
kind of
go.
to really do what they wanted.
But
What a great choice. I
Yeah,
met my wife.
yes, but they moved from Mexico,
Correct.
Correct.
But they think that,
Yeah.
I think at that time is more the land of, opportunity. I mean, I look at now, I'm not the smartest. I'm definitely not the tallest, but I've always said that I can pretty much, I put my mind to something and I can outwork anybody. And I think, anybody can do it. How much time and effort you wanted to put into it.
Yeah,
So my mom was very much that way, and my father. Up early, go to work, save your money, buy something, and do it over again.
okay.
So,
You learned some good values from them.
yeah,
Yeah.
I feel fortunate.
Yes, and that brings us around to one of the things you purchased was the Cottinger Barn here in Pleasanton.
Correct.
Why?
Interesting, because it was the real estate agent that I have here that I've used for years, Dale Morris, old-time jockey at the racetrack and been here forever, born and raised in Pleasanton. He came to me and he said, I have this property that you're really the perfect fit for it. And he knew the Koopmans. And so he went to the Koopmans and talked to them, and they had an offer on the property, which I believe was higher than what I ended up offering. And they had told the guy no,
On the other
what I
end.
understand months before, because they just didn't like some of the things I think that he said. The Koopmans are wonderful people, and Dale told about me, and we got to meet. They heard what I kind of had as my vision, because it was, the barn needed some work, but they had done so much with it from where it came from, because I guess they bought it in 1970, and they had actually done a pretty major, remodel and earthquaking, I believe in 1980.
Now, why did they buy it?
I don't know, because at that time it was a junkyard. It was just the barn, and the whole surrounding area was a junkyard. And I know the Koopmans built the two buildings that are there that is now called, it was called Adobe Plaza.
Yeah.
We've kind of renamed it Cottinger Barn Plaza for the barn.
Yeah.
But they built those, and I believe they built one in 72, and the other they completed in 74, 75.
Okay.
And then, because it's actually on two different lots, the barn's on one lot on its own, the way it's split, and then the other two properties are on their own parcel.
Okay.
Yeah. So I've always loved history. It was at a tough time because of COVID. lot of the companies with what they did were going under, because people weren't allowed to go into, in fact, all the companies were pretty much shut down except for Tri-Valley Chiropractic was still able to operate because they were considered medical. But everybody else was not doing well. I kind of fell in love with the property because I love history. So after I talked to Erika into trusting me, even though we could hopefully turn things around and make it into a viable decision, and yeah, that's what we did. We picked it up, and pretty much you can see me out there almost every weekend doing something. But it's turned into now we had someone that moved into it early on. It was kind of like an antique and trinkets thing in the barn. But so many people would come in and just be amazed by what the inside looks like and the history that's there and the stories that kind of developed around it, that we ended up parting ways. He ended up moving after about a year and worked on it to try to put it back to the way it looked probably in the, around the turn of the century there. And it's now, we use it for venues we've had some birthday parties and I think it was a 40-year class reunion for the 100-year of Amador. They had their class reunion there. So, class reunions, baby showers, rehearsal dinners, a lot of birthday parties. We have actually a kind of a neat, someone's going to do a Halloween party there on the 26th.
That would be fun.
So that's going to be kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell us, you've had some, I think, experiences with maybe people that passed through the barn
Different
over the
things,
ages.
yeah.
What kinds of things have happened?
So I think the most notable, and there's a picture in the barn, which kind of shows it, because I was working on the lighting. I just hung a new chandelier that we picked up like from 1901 or something. And I was working on it and, finishing the wiring, changing the bulbs and what have you. And Erika kept calling me saying, when are you going to come home? Come on, it's getting late. So I said, okay, I'm going to come home pretty soon. So I go to leave the barn and I stood in the doorway and I took 3 pictures. Click, click, click. And I took 3 pictures around the barn and I sent them off to her. I said, hey, what do you think of the chandelier? I'm on my way home. And I get home and she goes, oh, who was helping you? I said, nobody. Who's in this picture then? And I blew up the picture for the ghost walk because you look and there's definitely an image standing there and everybody says, oh, that's your shadow. And I said, okay, you go try to recreate the shadow. You go ahead and you stand anywhere and try to recreate that shadow. Yeah. I showed them where I was standing and you can recreate the shadow if you stand right up against the wall and the light hits you and goes through you. And I said, okay, so how does this picture capture the shadow and not the person?
Right.
So it's kind of, and then another time early on when I was working on the barn and I'd shut off the water. And this is when I had a nail salon and a hair salon that were coming in that morning. And I'd taken my shower, eating dinner, relaxing in my chair, and I go, oh, darn it. I forgot to turn back on the water. It's kind of a windy night, I want to say in November. So Erika goes, I'll go with you. Come on, let's go down. I'll help you turn it on. I said, oh, okay. So we jump in the car and we drive down and go and I turn on the water in order, to kind of take the air out of the lines. I walked up to the hose bib on the furthest part of the property. And as we're holding hands, walking in front of the barn, and both of us turned and looked at each other at the same time as we passed in front of the door because both of us felt something brush across us.
Come between you.
Yeah. And it's kind of an eerie feeling. We kind of looked at each other and said, okay. So then another experience that happened when I was, the barn has a wall that's under the stairway, okay, that we kind of put in. And what I want to do is make sure it stayed, we use square nails on it and we use reclaimed barn wood. And when we took the reclaimed barn wood off an old barn that I actually own on Division Street that Burnell used to own, so I'd taken boards off of there and I was wire brushing them and cutting them to size to put on in the barn. And I was working with the owners of, the owner of 925 Salon, Hasiel, and he was helping with this, because he's helped me the whole time on this project. It's a, labor of love for him also. And we had sawhorses with a piece of plywood, and we had all the wood on there, and we had a saw, and we had wire brushes, and we were sitting there, doing the work. And we got up and we were standing over about 15 feet away from that, away from the boards, okay? And Bree, the other owner of 925 Salon, comes through the door, and we turned to look at her, and when we turned to look at her, the sawhorses with the plywood on top, with a bunch of wood on top, completely flipped over. This is about 11 o'clock at night.
And it would be heavy.
There's no way it could flip. I mean, it literally, because the plywood was on top of the wood, the saw, everything. It flipped all the way over. And that's when we said, yeah, I think we're done for the night. And then there have been different things like the lights would turn on. We'd be sure we turned them off, and then the lights would turn on. And then we had a 50th birthday party there. And Erika and I were working in the barn one day, cleaning things up or doing something about 2 or 3 weeks after the party. And this woman came up to me, and she had a friend with her. And she says, "Oh, are you the owner?" I said, "Well, yes, I am." She says, "It's something pretty unusual happened while we were here for the party." I said, "Uh-oh." And she goes, "Oh, no, we had a great time. It was wonderful." She says, "But I was standing." She showed me where we were standing. She said, "I was kind of standing there. And my friend all of a sudden looking at me. He was giving me this weird look." She said, "The earring on my left ear all of a sudden stood up parallel to the ground. And then the earring came out of my ear and went 3 feet away." And I said, "Oh." And I had heard the story, and I can't remember who I heard it from, about Cottinger's maid or cook that liked shiny things, hair clips, earrings. I guess Terry used to tell this story. The old owner of the what was it called?
Florist.
Yeah, the florist that was there.
Oh, yeah, Terry, yeah.
About she still haunts the barn, and she likes sparkly things. And if you happen to be there and feel someone pulling on your hair on a hair clip or something, that's probably her. So, yeah. And then another thing was probably the one, because I heard the story of a certain part of the barn changes temperatures. So we've got a pizza oven that you can measure the temperature of something.
Yeah.
And it's not all the time. But what I did was during the winter, I went to an area where the inside of the barn was probably in the mid-70s. It wasn't quite winter yet, probably that shift like now. And yet there's that one corner of the barn, noticeably cooler. So I grabbed the pizza oven, measured the temperature, and sure enough, it was about 12 degrees cooler
Just in,
than
which
just
corner?
within 10, 12 feet. So you'd shoot there and you shoot there.
In front of the window. When
Yeah.
you first walk into the on the
Yeah,
right side.
on the right side. They say that was a jail cell for one of the cattle rustler or something, I think someone said. So another story from kind of Terry. She says, yeah, he still walks this area. So different times, summer or winter, you can feel it's definitely cooler in that one section. Yeah.
Did you ever meet Terry?
No,
I did, but I never talked to her.
No.
Okay, did better by going in there probably, but
never-
not conversing with her.
She was very interesting, in that, yes, she believed in angels and she would talk to people about their angels, but definitely felt there were quite a few ghosts in, Cottinger Barn. And she welcomed them, but I know she said one time she was walking up the steps and she turned around because she thought, oh, I have to get something, and was going to start down the steps, and she felt like someone blew in her face.
Oh.
And that woman stayed around for a while, but she felt she was connected to one of the people who worked for Terry at the barn. And so when that woman left, that ghost left too.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Because there's been situations where, again, because we worked on it for a good year before people really came in that transition period, because again, did a lot of the work myself with Hasiel, and there was one time where, there's two entrances to the barn. The one that faces closer to First Street, which was probably the front of the barn, and then the back entrance. Well, the back entrance is the one where 925 Salon is there and things like that, and Hasiel again is the owner there. So we were in there working again on the wood stuff that we were putting on the wall, trying to reclaim the wood, which took a long time, but we're sitting there working, and he was inside, and I saw him walk, because I was on the, kind of hard. If you walked in what is the back door to the right, that's where that table was that I was saying flipped over. And I was working there and I saw Hasiel, and I thought he walked upstairs. Well, there's a back entrance. He went out the back entrance to go to his salon. So I thought he was upstairs.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there working downstairs, and one of the pieces of wood had a few screws in it, and he had the drill. So I'm yelling at him upstairs because I could hear him walking around upstairs. So I kept yelling and yelling at him. So I kind of walked over to the stairs and said, "Hey, come on, I want to go home." And I said, "I need the drill." And all of a sudden he walked through the front door, the other door. And that was another one of those, again, late at night, usually it happens, because we'd work 10, 11, 12, didn't matter. But something like that happened. And not that anything wrong or they were doing anything. It just felt a little eerie, to be honest, So we'd end our day. It's like he tells a story about being at 925 Salon and working on that. And he said he'd be sitting there, and all of a sudden looking, all of a sudden the lights would turn on in the barn. And I said, "Did you turn them off?" He said, "Heck no."
Heck no.
Not exactly what he said. But I'm not going in there. The light just turned on, because you've got that window that faces Ray Street.
Right.
And he'd see the light turn on, and he'd go, "Unbelievable." So, yeah.
And now I had asked you before, and you'd mentioned something about a tunnel, that you've heard some stories or whatever. So can you tell us what you know about that? There's the tale is that there was a tunnel going to.
So supposedly, now Dale Morris, who I talked about before, he lived across the street from Ray Street. So he's on Ray Street, across from the Cottager Barn.
Right.
Okay, so he's been here forever, and the people, the house next to him, the greenhouse with the white pillars, he has been in the tunnel entrance at that home. That they say that was the sheriff's house, and the tunnel goes from the sheriff's house to the barn. That was one of the
Now, when we're
tunnels.
saying sheriff, we're not saying Cottinger.
No, not Cottinger. Evidently, it was another sheriff that lived across the street at one point. And evidently, the prisoners used to go, because stories told that the sheriff was shot one time, but lived when he was transporting a prisoner outside. So they said they built the tunnel so the person didn't have to come above ground.
Right.
So they just travel under to the sheriff's house to be quote unquote booked or whatever. So, and he said he's been in the tunnel entrance at that house across the street from the barn.
Okay, and you're going to try to find out more about.
I'm going to ask him. I'm going to see if I can talk to the people that are there and see if I can, uncover the entrance there.
Yeah.
And then I talked to Mrs. Koopman, and she tells a story about having being in a tunnel at a very young age. At the Pleasanton Hotel. And she says that tunnel also goes to the barn. And the other one that she mentioned is that one that went from Cottager's house, that was the courthouse. And
He turned into the
makeshift
courthouse,
right. And she said a tunnel also went from there, which I guess the house was near Dean's Cafe.
No,
maybe.
from what I know, the Cottinger's house was behind the Oasis restaurant.
Oh, okay.
Which makes more sense,
Yes.
because it'd be closer to the barn.
It'd be closer to the barn.
Yeah, that does.
Someone told me Dean's at one time, but
That does make
it was
sense.
in their outbuilding or something, but she said a tunnel also went from there under there. Now, the Koopmans at one time, it had the old, in fact, I saw you pointed out the gun that they found.
Yeah.
Well, the way they probably found it is because Cottinger Barn used to have 4x12 redwood planks as a floor in the barn.
Okay,
And they took those out and they excavated, they poured a 6-inch slab of cement now.
okay,
So the tunnel's probably closed forever, at that
Yeah.
point, at least from the barn area. So,
okay. But yes, it'd be great, we're hoping that we can interview Mrs. Koopman because maybe she can tell us a little bit more, but
yeah,
she doesn't say she walked in the tunnel, she just said she's
she was in the
tunnel.
opening of the tunnel, yeah, that's what she told
And she
me,
saw the,
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
because there's still that mystery
There's
about.
still that
Well, I
mystery,
know,
well,
everybody talks about it and people ask about it, people who come by,
So I-
what about the tunnel?
Yeah.
We don't know much about it either.
so the gay 90s evidently, have you,
Yes, that they thought they had a tunnel too, and what we've probably determined is that there probably wasn't one, some people thought it ran up and down Main Street. That probably wasn't correct. But Deborah Acosta McKeon, was a city manager. We did an oral interview of her and she did say that some of her workers told her that they saw evidence of tunnels. Whereas some of the other city people we talked to said no. But she was involved when we redid Main Street and the sewer system. So, I would think
Yeah.
that maybe she's, correct in what she was saying that there were, but probably they didn't all attach. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
Right.
But that, Cottinger would have used a tunnel like that for a purpose, yeah, that makes sense. Where gay 90s might have had a tunnel, or they might have had, how did you even keep things safe in the old days?
Right.
Well-
Except to dig, areas and.
I'll give you another,
People wouldn't go
so
into it.
I told you I inherited the property from my mom's side of the family, okay, her last name was Perez. Okay,
Was,
Perez,
Perez,
Okay.
okay.
so, I dug there,
No, we're talking
Okay.
Niles.
we're talking in Niles.
Okay.
So the interesting thing is, in the rear of the store, my mom had always said there's a still underneath the floor. Now, floor was sealed over with layers of flooring. Well, I took out the layers of flooring, and when I took out the last layer, there were steps that went down to an area that literally about 10 by 10 area, and there was a still. So I'm thinking that in those days, I'm wondering if the tunnels could have been, prohibition, bootleg whiskey. I mean, it was obvious this was done it was behind my grandfather's store. There was a 1-bedroom, 1-bath unit. And my mom always said it was under there.
Oh,
We never looked at it, and I never, could never access it. And when I redid the floor, took out a few
then
planks
you
and replaced some
found-
dry rot, and there under the floor was a set of stairs. Walking down, and then an old still under there.
yeah,
Yeah, so that's what they used to do, is they used to make, and they also say there's tunnels in downtown Niles that run, so it's interesting that Niles, Pleasanton, both have stories about tunnels.
yeah. But you do, think, how did people keep their money or their valuables safe? Because homes were very easy to break into at that time.
Correct.
And of course, at one time when Cottinger was here, the nearest law enforcement was Oakland. So by the time they would get here,
Too late.
yeah, way too late. So to dig some kinds of tunnels or some kind of rooms
Keep
or
your
pits
valuables that
to-
are hidden
yeah,
away,
makes
yeah.
sense, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so, well, the interesting thing is, a couple of, friends that were here from Mexico, they came into the barn because they were helping me work on it one time. And they were looking at the walls, and they looked at the wall where the brick is, right? To where all of a sudden you'll have adobe,
Yeah,
and then you'll have stone on the bottom. And then all of a sudden, for no reason, you all of a sudden see some red brick. And he looked at it and says, "You taking those out?" I said, "No, I can't touch the walls, it's a National Historic, monument." And he says, "Oh, well, well, you know why? I said, no. And he goes, well, in Mexico, that's what we do. We take out a section of wall and we replace it with a different medium, brick, to hide our valuables.
So behind that wall, the brick, there might be,
Correct, because the
hiding
walls,
place.
the walls in cottage are about 32 inches thick.
okay,
So the brick's only 6-7 inches thick.
okay.
So they're made
So
to
can I
void.
have a key and I'll go,
Yeah.
take a
Chip out
sledgehammer?
the brick, you see, the little chisel and,
See
hammer.
what's in that
You
wall.
know, it's
Yeah.
always been, I've always wanted to get like, I don't know, if a metal detector will go through a wall or what,
Yeah.
something like that just to find, because we did find a lot of, as we were working on the barn, because we put the pavers around the outside to try to make it more inviting, and
Yeah,
that actually took me about a year to do. It's a lot of work, but we took out about 18 inches of soil out of there. And in that soil, we found a lot of very interesting artifacts of, dated. A 1939 medallion to the San Francisco Expo.
oh,
A lot of St. Christopher, St. Jude medals, some of them actually inscripted on the back, that was a gift to somebody because it says from Vienna to Roger, coins, we found 2 Mexican pesos, which were called solid silver, which were called Caesar's crown, and from 1898, and then a silver dollar from 1878, a couple dimes, a quarter, jail cell keys. We found what we think, as I looked it up, Google's great, looked it up, and it was actually a military laundry pin, because I found it's like a clothespin,
yeah,
and it had a tag on it with a number on it. And take a picture of it, it comes up, it looked just like it says military, laundry tag. So I guess, for some reason, a lot of bus tokens to Santa Cruz, student bus tokens. So I don't know if a bus ran through there or what, but we found like 3 or 4. We found a 5-cent token for a quart of milk there. So, spent bullet shells. Trying to think of what else we found there. Chinese coins also. So Mexican coins and Chinese coins, and most likely at that time, probably the Mexican and Chinese built it, at that time, because that's where the labor came from.
and there was a small Chinatown.
Chinatown, yeah,
In
that's it,
downtown
found out from you,
Pleasanton,
just right down the street. So that seems to make sense. So, and then found some bottles that date back to 1880. I found one bottle that's, kind of a bluish, writing on it, or stamped, one of the stamped bottles. Vaseline bottle, an old Vaseline bottle, a mason jar, just, a lot of broken glass, a lot of things that you can't tell what they were, but, found a lot of interesting little things in the dirt there.
Yeah,
I wish I could have sifted through more, but,
you'd still be
yeah,
doing the
I still be
patio.
working there today, like an excavation.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Oh, interesting though, yeah, that you could find those things, but, so if you get to go in that house, you're gonna have to take pictures and show them to us, here at the museum, because we'd love to know more about that.
Okay.
And I'm surprised that we've not heard ever about that. I don't know anybody who said anything about that house, so
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah.
But,
I'll make sure I interview Dale, I'll find out about it, because
Yeah.
he's lived here forever, he was
Yeah.
born and raised here.
and you're going to be talking to the Koopmans to see if
Yes.
we can interview them,
Yes,
and maybe Bob is her son.
yes,
Maybe he would want to be in on the
Yeah.
interview
Yeah.
too, because
Yes.
that might be helpful.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
yeah, because he was at that time a young buck pouring cement and working on things out there, probably did a lot of work on the barn himself.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this has been very interesting, that you have such an interest in history, probably gotten from your parents. Did they have,
Yeah, my mom liked holding on to things.
okay,
she didn't sell many properties. I mean, the house that I came home to is the house that she pretty much owned her whole life.
Yeah,
So they didn't like moving around. They, born in Niles, and when she passed away, she was in Niles. And same with my dad.
yeah,
So all their life here, I know nowadays, it gets tough to afford, this area.
right,
I'm very thankful that my parents had the foresight to hold on to the things they kept, which
yeah,
gave me a little leg up.
yeah,
So
certainly did, yeah. So this question is to both of you. Who do you feel in your life was a real inspiration to you? Or someone that just was very important to you?
Important to me. Well, when I think about the life that we have, our children's life, how, how compared to what our ancestors have gone through, so much easier, right? So I do think about, at times, about my grandmother, yes, of course, but the first generation that came from me, that came to United States, that was my great grandparents. Actually, it was great grandfather, and he married my great grandmother she was a picture bride. Back then, you used to hear the word picture
yes.
bride, so she was a picture bride.
And
so
a picture bride was, will you explain it for us?
Yes, so picture bride was when, I think for my great grandfather, he arrived in Oahu, or I think Oahu first, to work in the sugarcane factory or sugarcane field. And he was alone. He was a single person. He wanted to bring a bride from Japan. And so he's never met my great grandmother, but through the picture, a photo of somebody who was arranging those marriages, actually, he didn't know who she was until the day she arrived. So they didn't really have a choice of selecting who the bride was going to be.
So I was going to ask you, did they get pictures?
They didn't know ahead of time, from what I hear.
did they get pictures of, or they're just picking a name?
He received the picture. He had the picture, I think, but didn't really know.
About
Does the picture really look like the person?
Sometimes it was, sometimes it wasn't.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I've never seen the photo of my great grandmother, so I don't know if it was a real true picture or not. But so that was a picture bride, and so.
But it'd be interesting to know, did they have to pay for that service?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, but anyway, and she came over from Japan.
Yes.
To Hawaii to meet this man who was going to be her husband, who she had no idea.
Right, and a lot of the times they thought, oh, you're going to America, right? Even though it's Hawaii, going to America, and you get to live in a big house, big country, and have a much better life, because a lot of the times these picture brides, they come from a not so wealthy situation and they're just escaping the country to come to a better land. So they're hoping for that, but didn't know until they arrived here what kind of labor they had to go through, the hardship they had to go through. So you think of that, of what they had to go through back in the days of 1900s, and look at what we have now. Makes us just appreciate, even more of our life. So.
Yeah.
Well, for me, I tell my kids that in life you go down a road and all of a sudden you hit a Y in the road, okay? And it's very important to know when you hit that Y in the road, and if you took the wrong path, that you're able to turn around and come back. And sometimes people play an important part in that Y. Of course, my parents, because I think they instilled the work ethic.
Yes.
My mom, the dogged determination that she had, and my father was more of the quiet, extremely hard worker. Okay, so of course them. And then I think about the little things that happened in my life that changed my life. And I think one of them was when I actually interviewed for Xerox. I interviewed for the machine division. So selling the equipment, which everybody thinks, oh yeah, that's Xerox.
Yeah.
I worked for a different division, and it was the Xerox Business Services. what happens is I got turned down. Out of it started out probably as 50 people that interviewed for the job, and then they narrow it down and narrow it down and narrow it down. And we had a panel interview with about 4 people. And I remember going to Xerox Corporation, interviewing with them and getting done. And I was the only male. And then everybody else there for the interview was a female. And so I remember leaving, and I think I was the last person to be interviewed. A guy followed me out, and he stopped me and he says, "Excuse me, Bruce." And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Oh, hi, you know." He says, "Well, I want you to know you're probably not going to get the job." And he says, "Because it's slotted for a female." And so he says, "But I'm going to give you this card. I want you to call this guy, and I'm going to call him and tell him he needs to talk to you." And that card was the card of Mike Michaelis, who was starting a new division of Xerox
And who then
in
became your
Silicon Valley.
partner.
That became my partner.
Oh, my goodness.
And so I look at that as that person changed my life, and Mike Michaelis changed my life, because when I showed up for an interview, I was graduating from San Jose State. I was working at a bartender. Unfortunately, I'd been in a fight, and so my glasses were broken and taped in one corner.
Always looks good.
And always looks, and even better when I was wearing my brother's suit that came down to my knuckles. And I fell asleep in the lobby
Oh,
because I was working nights as a
Yeah.
bartender.
yeah.
I still, to this day, Mike tells a funny story of, "Mike, why did you ever hire me?" And he says, "Someone that has that much determination just will not fail. I didn't think I could go wrong." But I think about how I looked, and I look at the picture now and I go, "Oh my God." So I think, and then of course, meeting my wife and being, probably, couldn't ask for a more
Yeah, if you'd
perfect
gone to New
partnership.
York
Yeah.
with Xerox, would you ever have gotten back here, or would you ever have met? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just, it's, and that's what I tell my kids, if you think you're going down the wrong path, turn around as soon as you can, because it's easier to get back. The further you go down that path, the more difficult it becomes.
Yeah.
So
It's okay to turn around.
it's okay to turn around. So, different mentors, my parents and Mike, those are probably the 2 keys, because Mike is a bit older than me, extremely intelligent, super mellow guy. Not like me at all. I'm definitely a type A personality. I'm definitely a risk taker. He's more of a,
But that's maybe why the two of you get along.
Yeah.
And work good in a business together. Yeah.
yeah. So,
Interesting. Yeah. Well, thank you. Is there anything you wanted to add before we?
Well, we're just very grateful for this opportunity
Yeah.
to talk about.
you don't think about history as
Yourselves
much,
and-
you
you
look
don't.
back and you bring back, actually, your questions are great because they bring back a lot of
Yes,
memories
it's
for us.
wonderful, yes.
Saying, "God, we really have to do the same thing about,"
And your
So
children
people
will get
know.
this, so that
Yeah.
if they don't remember your stories or haven't heard the stories, it's a way for them to have these memories of you.
Because,
Absolutely.
we hope that we all have an appreciation of history of where we've come from and what it's taken. I mean, no matter how much, you look here in the museum, it's incredible.
Yeah.
Just the little things you can learn about. And that's why I love at the barn. I love taking people through a little tour there and talk about the different things that have happened and, where I found things and what I've done, like an interesting story like that palm tree that's there. It looks like it's planted perfectly in the middle of the plaza.
Yeah.
No, Bob Koopman told me, no, that's a volunteer seed
Oh.
that was dropped there. And it is the most beautiful palm tree,
Yeah.
because when I bought it, that's the first thing I did is I paid someone to trim it up real nice and make it look real pretty. Incredible. And evidently Bob's dad loved palm trees, and that's why he left it there. And now it is huge.
Yeah.
It's giant, and it's kind of the statement at the palm tree, and every Christmas we decorate it with lights and have everything going on there. So it's
Well, that's one thing I'd like to, before we wind up, is just to thank you guys for what you're doing at the plaza. I mean, the Christmas thing last year was amazing.
Our
All
North
the
Pole and all the people that
lights
donated
and
their time, the Santa
yes,
Clauses.
Yes, it was just wonderful, and you assist us as the museum with the ghost walk, in that you open the Cottinger Barn to everybody, and we just appreciate that so much because it is a big part of our history here in Pleasanton, and it's the oldest building that we have.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really important to save it, and that you are bringing it back to what it probably looked like.
Back to the future.
Back to the future. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
you.
You're welcome.